Today's chat is brought to you by, well, all of your support. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through Podbean's crowdfunding, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a patron of the FFC, please be sure to visit our website and click on the support link. Even a single dollar helps, and for those of you who are already patrons, thank you again for your generosity.
You may have heard the whispers of guardians gathering in the shadows, exploring the mysteries of this world and the worlds which surround us. We are all in search of truth. Sometimes we need to focus that search. Focus that fire. And so we come together. Welcome to Focused Fire Chat.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on May 15th, 2020 over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. As always, want to give a big shout out to our live chat here with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us once again. This week's episodes are going to be focused around exploring the current state of the Vanguard. This particular episode will serve as what we have come to call the intro session of the week's exploration. Before we go any further, however, let's run through a quick introduction of who all we have with us on the show. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86.
And this is your I swear I'm not playing Warlock full-time, guys. Other host, Green-Eyed Music Lover.
The floofy floof.
The floofies.
I have been floofy floofing.
The graceful glide into abyss.
I have not fallen off the maps yet. Not yet. I've been good.
I can't, like, it's for whatever reason, if I switch over between the two, I can't get the jump down again.
Yeah. It takes a little bit of time. I can't switch back and forth in the same evening yet, because that just hurts my head a little bit, but if I start the evening on a Warlock, I can manage to play the Warlock the rest of the evening, but if I start on Hunter and switch midway, it's just really rough.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, and last but definitely not least, in the hot seat as guest co-host, we have our good friend, HeyImDeadAgain, or as we'll be referring to them, Cam. Cam, how are you doing tonight? Or
I'm
today?
good. I mean, I don't know what time is anymore. It's on full distortion on me, so I'm good.
So I was talking to, I think Josh was asking when the Let's Chat episode's going to be dropping that we recorded the other week. And I was like, oh, it'll be like a couple weeks. And he's like, time has no meaning anymore. What date? What's the number of the day?
I need the date.
So I'm going to turn it over to Green, though, for her normal interrogation.
Interrogation? You make me sound so mean sometimes.
What is your favorite story and lore?
What is your favorite story and lore from Destiny?
I mean, we all have the good standby of Dwindler's
kudos
Ridge.
to him. He just rolled with it.
We have the good standby of Dwindler's Ridge. I really love all the Ahamkara Great Hunt stories. Like, those are probably my favorite cards.
Yes.
Because there's just something so magical about playing poker with, a giant space dragon as an old man.
The grandfather?
Yes, as the grandfather, and then he just eats you. Which will come in handy later.
The best part about that was he had the little visor cap. If I isn't that the one that gets the little green
or
visor?
Caliban was wearing a visor. Someone was wearing a visor.
One of them. Oh,
it was so great. But just that entire series of cards was just so funny. Shaxx demanding to fight a dragon, with a sword or his battle axe. I don't remember which, but it was. And I think was it Lady Ephrodite who was like, "Why don't you have a gun?" And he's like, "You don't want to be a knight?"
I just love Wei Ning, who just wants to punch things forever.
Yes, that is wishing this? You've been wishing for this? just that entire series of cards is so funny. But yeah, no, anything with that, either that or really anything with the Hive. The Hive are probably my favorite lore-wise.
The Hive has got some really, really long lore, which is nice. It's a lot thicker, I think, than a lot of other races or classes that we have at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's always good. You actually kind of mentioned that you had a standby one as well, though. Is that the Great Hunt just kind of your primary one?
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh, I love the Ahamkara kind of thing, Wish Dragon for life.
Yeah, because it's such a cool concept for a species to exist, and like I don't necessarily know if I buy into the whole like Riven's the last one, at least in our universe, or it was the last one, because I'm like, well, they can shapeshift, so, and they consume reality. How do we know?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to turn into good old Eva or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. It just, there's so many different memes of Eva being 40 different things.
I love it.
Leave my cookie grandma who gives me machine guns alone.
I may have just like continually
that
contributed
statement
to
alone
this
makes me concerned.
What? You don't like Cookie Grandma who gives you machine guns?
Cookie Grandma that gives you machine guns.
Have you not seen that picture? It's like, hi, I am Cookie Grandma. I give you cookies and machine guns.
I have not seen this.
Oh, I need to find
awesome.
it. I need to find it.
That's awesome. So, okay, backing up a little bit, since Blue technically jumped ahead of the question queue, where can we find you on the internet?
I am on Twitter. I don't tweet a lot, mostly just because I don't think people want to hear about my life, but that's just me. But I'm on Twitter. You are welcome to find me on there at HeyImDeadAgain. Pretty much everywhere else, I'm just HeyImDeadAgain or some variant form on it. Like, I think on Steam, I'm just Dead Again. But here on Twitter, in Twitch chat, wherever.
Which, by the way, I do love your name. It's just one of those names that it's just like, hey, I'm dead again. It just, gosh, it's just funny.
It's great to see it pop up in the kill feed, because it's just like, it's a nice little like, oh, I'm dead again. And that's honestly why I made it. I made it because I'm the resident bullet sponge, is what I like to say, of my primary fire team. I'm the person who's like, I'm going to go find the biggest, baddest ogre and punch it. And it's probably going to kill me, but I'm going to do it.
I like it. So what was it that actually got you into studying lore? Because you call yourself an amateur lore person on Twitter, even though I know a little bit better that you actually know a bit more of what you're talking about than you let on.
I got into lore through a couple different games, mainly the Bloodborne and Dark Souls series. And that sort of like that's transitioned over into other games. Destiny's lore has always been fascinating for me, because there's just like so many entry levels that you can get into, because you can like just play through the story and there's, you know, that lore level right there. But if you want to get into some of the side characters or some of the weapons that tell you some stories about it, like it was so like it's more accessible, at least now, because all your lore entries are in game, whereas in Destiny 1 you had to go to a different website. But I don't know. I think one of my friends sent me like a timeline of everything that's happened in Destiny, and I didn't realize that like it didn't just start with, you know, like I think I made an assumption that it would just start with the game, and it didn't. It started, you know, like eons ago with the creation of the Proto Hive on Fundaments Moons, and I was just so fascinated just reading through that I was like, I need more. And it's been 3 years since then, so here we are.
I like it, because that was one of the things, I actually started talking to Julie about it recently, where we got into the lore a little bit more thoroughly. She's always kind of been around whenever I've been rambling about it, but there's never been a true understanding, per se. Mm-hmm. It's just been, I've talked about these things on and on and on, and it's funny, because she didn't realize how massive the lore is for a game like this. Yeah. Blue was kind enough to send me physical copies of the lore, and it's bigger than Tolkien. Oh, yeah. Like, if you put all the books of Tolkien back to back to back and stack them on top of each other, including all the expanded universe stuff, Silmarillion, the Hobbit, and all of that, it's still, the Destiny lore is way thicker, and that blew her mind. Yeah. That there's that much going on here. Yeah,
it's really funny. I told you off stream, I worked with kids in an after school program, and I got the lore books from the Bungie store. And I was just, you know, we were having like silent reading time, and I was reading, and I had like 2 kids come up, and they were like, "Oh, what is this?" And I was showing it to them, and they're like, "Oh, so this is like the story of the game." I was like, no. This is like a side story of a side story of like 3 other side stories of a alien species, because it was the Hive one that you meet. And then we get to the game. And they're like, "Yep. So how big is the story of the game?" And I said, "I will let you know when it finishes, if it does finish. It's been a while."
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There's a lot of background stuff that just a lot of people don't know about. So here's a question that I've actually been curious, because I don't think I actually know the answer to it. I've seen you cheer on other classes, but what class do you primarily play in game?
I am a hunter. I was a day one hunter in Destiny 1. And I have all three classes, but my main is my hunter. Has seen me through many a trials and tribulations in this game. But I think it's hunter, although a close second is unfortunately a titan, just because it's so much fun to punch things. But yeah, hunter.
I can agree on the punching things. Titan was definitely a fun class to play. I just haven't touched it in a while. It's been a bit.
Yeah.
It's been a bit, guys.
It's been a bit.
But, yes. Alright, so, here's a crazy question.
Mm-hmm.
If you could change any aspect of the game, of the lore, any aspect of the lore in game, what one thing would you change? And if you changed that one thing, would it break some other stories because of it? Or would you want to break the other stories?
Oh, that's good. What would I change? I gotta think about what I'd change first, because I'm sure it would break something. Everything's so interconnected. I've seen a couple different things of people trying to connect all the stories in Destiny, and it just ends up looking like a really drunk spider web.
Yep.
And I think if I could change one thing, I think the only thing I would change is I just want some stories to be resolved more.
Okay.
I love a good cliffhanger, but there are a couple threads that I still want to know. Like, I want to know about the stranger, because she was featured so heavily in the first vanilla story, and we have nothing since. But yeah, I don't know. Outside of that, I don't know if I really would change anything. The lore is kind of one of those things that I hold very dear in this game. It's really been something that I enjoy digging into a lot. So, I don't know. I'll have to think about it. I may have another answer.
Oh, I like it, though. Is there one thing that if you could write, I guess, would be another way to word this. If you could write it for any story, what story would you want to write for? Or who would you want to write for?
I would love, more tales from the Drifter. Because his whole story about going to, the other planets and watching all of his other light-bearing friends die, I want more of that. That would be a lot of fun. I would pay great money to see, just more about the Vanguard, and particularly Cade. Cade's whole different iterations to get him to Cade 6 would be fun, I think. I think that'd be a lot of fun to go through. Just him as a kindergarten waking up the first time and then dealing with that. Yeah, I could do that. I would do Cade, I think.
Cade's story would be a fun one to get kind of more the background story of what's actually going on with him.
Because the whole Ace of Spades quest was a lot of fun, going through all of his stories in that book. Funny
story about just his use of playing cards and the different types of playing cards. We went back into D1 the other day. So, and Wicked is a veteran of D1, but Raz has never played it, so we were showing Raz around, and we did the Cade Stash mission.
Oh, okay.
And you remember that side room you could go into that has the different playing cards where there was supposedly a bunch of loot there? Wicked had no idea about it, so it's fun to go back sometimes and show other people things that you found back in the old stuff.
Yeah, I did. I played D1 at just right at the end of April for the first time in years, and was just hit with so much nostalgia of so much time running around. I think I walked around the Cosmodrome for 45 minutes, not doing anything, just looking at everything again.
Yeah, it has been fun to kind of dive back in there a bit. I think the thing that's been interesting is going back in and looking at Siva stuff. But
yeah, Siva's...
That's just me.
Siva's fun. There's so many things in game world that are so interesting through Ahamkara and Siva, and the pacifistic light bearers who live at the edge of the galaxy. What's going on with them in the pyramid ships? Are they okay? Do we hear from them? There's so many things.
Absolutely. All right, Blue. I'm going to toss it back to you.
I don't have anything this week.
You don't have any special announcements?
That's
I have one if you don't.
loaded question because now I feel like I should have a special announcement and I'm forgetting something. Yeah.
So,
I'm nervous.
Special announcement for everybody, as my co-host realizes what he forgot. I have started up a new Twitter account called Destiny Lore Bites that a lot of the cards that have been recorded for Focus Fire Chat have been condensed, because it's only 2 minutes and 20 seconds per that's allowed on Twitter, have been condensed down into small, digestible bite sizes for you to enjoy on Twitter. So if you are a fan of the show and would like daily lore readings, go and follow Destiny Lore Bites. It's up. I do plan on recording more of the full books like I used to, and putting them out through the podcast itself, so you guys can enjoy it there. So that's the more related to FFC Blue thing that I think Blue may have forgotten about, but
I'm sorry.
But he's okay. Those are so cool because it's nice to like I forgot the entire story of Alpha Loopy, and that was the last one that I listened to, and I was like, oh yeah, that was a thing.
Yeah, I'm going back through and recording a bunch of things that are super, super old. The poetry is something that I'm actually going to take a lot more time to record itself, because the poetry for Alpha Lupi is gorgeous and deserves an actual performance rather than just me reading it like a grade school teacher would read. But yeah, it's been good stuff. All right, so State of the Vanguard, Blue.
It's a broketed system.
Oh,
it is.
It's my favorite.
Is your favorite?
No,
Why
it's
is
not.
Your favorite?
It's not my favorite. I was trying to describe it to my friend who does not play Destiny at all, and I think I just described it as it's like a bunch of. It's just like if you picture what High School Musical was like, where they're dancing in the lunchroom about sticking to the status quo. It's just imagine that, but they're in charge of a city, and no one likes each other. Because that's what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah.
It makes for great writing and great research, but I'm just like, how is this still functioning?
High school politics in the Destiny universe.
It really is.
See,
it's almost like
Vanguard.
It's a clique.
I mean, if we're going to talk about kind of the history of it, we can go all the way back and just say that what we're experiencing with the Vanguard right now isn't exactly a new thing.
Nope.
It's actually fairly common.
Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, the entire, not just the Vanguard, but the actual consensus was born out of the strife that the new city was facing down with the faction wars. You know, it's like... They were born out of the turmoil that, and I'm being very general here, but that humanity created for itself, because humans have a tendency not to be able to have anything nice because they like squabbling over things. It's like as soon as we get past the everyone's going to die, it turns into that's my pile of rocks. And it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And it's like, but I mean, because if you look at the history of the city itself, it was very quickly after the city was formed that your faction wars broke out. And, you know, the consensus was really formed by not just the Guardians. Actually, I kind of have the argument that the Vanguard was actually made to make sure that the Guardians didn't align with the factions as much as they were before the faction wars, because if it's one thing that we didn't need on top of humans arguing, it's Guardians arguing, because the way Guardians argue kind of tends to level things. Like, you know, it's the comic with Saint and Osiris where they're having their conversation. It's like, yeah, you need to not have that type of argument with factions, because when you're talking between Guardians, that's one thing. Like, you know, if it's Crucible, that's one thing. But when you put the humans into a mix, or mortals into the mix, it becomes suddenly much more serious and much more deadly.
Yeah, and it's a weird system. It's a weird system because it's like you have the Vanguard,
makes sense in its own way, right?
Yeah, well, and like you have the Vanguard, which is sort of like ruled by this triumvirate of three of, you know, the most powerful three sort of guardians at that time. And then you have the Consensus, which is like sort of like, I just kept drawing parallels to like ancient Rome, which I feel is where a lot of this was based off of. Because you have all these inner factions of guardians and mortal groups all vying sort of for power, because I don't believe that you wouldn't have a consensus if there wasn't people who sought power. But then they all answered to the speaker at one time, which kind of gave it a more religious feel to it. So I was like, what? Is this a government agency? Is it a religious group? What is this?
Well, I think what it started out as was actually less religious in nature and more just out of necessity. Because if we go back into the way that the city was created, the city was designed as literally just a safe haven at the very, very beginning of it. It was just the safest place where everyone could gather, which was under the Traveler. It wasn't until the speaker actually made the deal with the Iron Lords, who were the warlords in the area, that the city itself started gaining some structure.
Yeah. And I mean, because it needed to rise out because of people getting caught in the crossfire of all the warlords constantly scrabbling for power. Scrabbling, whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think the other thing is, I would say the way I kind of understood the history of it is that there was no one leader. If you look at the breakdown of it, it's the great factions, the three great factions, which currently are Dead Orbit, New Monarchy, and Future Warcold. At the time of its inception, I think, as far as we can tell with the current information, it was Dead Orbit, New Monarchy, and the Concordat. Which, you know, we have, multiple people have talked about that whole drama. But anyways, you have the three factions, which are only three of many factions. So they're the three, probably the more predominant, the more popular factions at the time. And then you had three members of the Guardians. And I think, you know, in that case, you can make an argument that the reason that there is one of each class is because there were three classes, three classifications of Guardians, three, you know, mindsets. It just makes it even. It's, you know, and each one of the Guardian types kind of has their own forte as far as specialization. You know, the Titans will be more militaristic and defensive. Warlocks kind of focus, and you see this with the duties of the different mentors, but like the Warlocks were focused on researching and understanding what was needed, basically like military intelligence.
Yeah.
And then the Hunters were responsible for, you know, basically making sure that everything was, they were the scouts, they were the protectors of those outside of the city wall sometimes, you know, all that. And then what you do is, if you sit back and you look at that, well, that's an even number. So if you're calling itself a consensus, which means that, you know, probably majority will rule, well, what happens if there's a tie? And then that's when you have the speaker come in, not as a leader necessarily, but as like, you know, that a lot of times you'll see it as explained as like the thumb of the fist, you know, like it's not necessarily the most strong. It's not the strongest finger, but it's a necessary finger because it helps break that tie. And I think that's how I've kind of always read the consensus, as it's this kind of self-contained, it is a governing body for sure, but it's a governing body that by very nature allows for the various, you know, chorus of voices within the city to have at least a chance for their voice to be heard. And we know that the factions can change, right? Because the consensus vote, this is also a topic of much fascination for me, because politics is a very interesting thing, especially in dystopian fantasy worlds. It's very interesting to see how they're like, this is the evolution of how things happen. It's like, yeah, this kind of it's interesting to see how different people have their own take on what people would do. But I think like that has always been the way I've read it. And, you know, with that political structure, it's very interesting to me right now, because if that is indeed the case, it is currently a political structure that is predominantly controlled by the mortals at this point.
Which, yeah,
Because
like that was something
none of the
I always
factions have
was.
lost anything. Like,
Yeah, that was something I was like always fascinated about. Is like technically speaking, the single most powerful arm would be the Vanguard because they're paracausal demigods, and they are not the quote unquote ruling group. You know, they're basically just sort of the if you want to be hardcore about it, the militaristic arm of it, or if you want to be more peacekeeping, it's the peacekeepers.
But the thing is with the Vanguard themselves weren't they just their own group? They didn't necessarily each have their own. Right, but with the consensus themselves, didn't their vote essentially just have the one vote for them? They just had multiple representatives within it.
I think originally that was the point of the Vanguard commander, was like, because then you would have the different voice. But I mean, I go back and forth because I don't recall fully if we've ever had an action. The only time we've seen them all vote is with the Concordat, which all of them voted, and then with Osiris, which again, all of them voted individually, right? There wasn't a. So I mean, and we have. It feels like every time we get mention of the consensus, we find a new subset of rules, like with the whole thing with the Vanguard Commander and Saint 14. Like, the only reason Osiris became Saint 14 was because Osiris became Vanguard Commander was because Saint 14 bypassed the decision of the consensus by stepping down and then basically putting Osiris as his replacement. Which didn't, and it was called out in the web lore that decision did not require the approval of the consensus.
Yeah, so they kind of like operate as like their own independent body,
right?
So like they decide their own politics, but they will sort of take their, I guess, lead, because I know in D1 a lot of strikes you got handed down from the speaker, and now it's, since we don't have a speaker, that mainly comes down from the war, from the Vanguard themselves, the leaders themselves.
Right. And I think the other thing too for that piece is like Zavala, and like it was definitely clear it was clarified a little bit more obviously in the Destiny 2 introduction, because predominantly I think it's always been this way, it just wasn't really stated in game, but like Zavala was always responsible for military decisions, Ikora was always the one who would be the researcher, and Cade was always the one who handed out bounties, but Zavala was always the one who handed out strikes. And like, you would have that because strikes are actually military operations, whereas bounties are those kind of one-off, cleaning up various things and all that. So it made, like, that distinction does make a lot of sense in my head, but I know that D2, they really did clarify that significantly more with the presentation of actually having, like, you go to Zavala for strikes, you go to Shaxx for Crucible, and when Cade was still around, you went to Cade for those random, I guess you would call them super bounties of different stuff. My biggest thing is, like, I wish we had something with, like, Ikora, and I think we used to have, like, every now and then we would be able to do some stuff for Ikora.
Well, if you go back to the structure of D1, they basically walked us through the missions of various campaigns. Cade would walk you through as a hunter noob. He was your mentor. He would walk you through each step, and then Zavala walked you through a lot of aspects going into Dark Below, and Ikora had her own campaign that she helped walk you through. Like, they all shared the role of military leaders in that case, but now they've been kind of repurposed to more of what you're talking about, where Zavala is only the strike leader. He's, at least at this point that we know about within our interactions with him, besides cutscenes. But Ikora has gone to being so involved with her hidden that she actually has no involvement with us at all at this point.
Yeah, which is sad. And then the other thing that got called out with the web lore is the resources that the Vanguard commander has at their disposal is not just the Vanguard resources, it's also the city resources. So the OWL sector, the databases, like all the libraries and everything like that are apparently kept somewhat under a lock and key, because that's what when Saint gives Osiris the title of Vanguard Commander, Osiris makes the comment, like, he's like, you're giving me access to all this information that is by nature not readily available to the average person. He's like, are you sure you want to do that? And that's when Saint responds with, well, I don't have anyone I feel like would be more responsible with it. But it was interesting to me because it also clarified that there are aspects of the city, or the factions, if you will, that are separate and independent from the Guardians. The Owl Sector is the Owl Sector is one of those things where it is separate from the Hidden, and in a lot of ways, actually, the Hidden are subservient to Owl Sector, because whenever you see the interaction there, the Owl Sector people are being supported by Hidden because they're Guardians.
Well,
so
that's
they're
what
able
the Hidden do. The Hidden are support groups out there running missions to help support other.
Correct. Yeah. But the Guardians, it to me, Owl Sector has always kind of been an interest to me, because it's like it's the CIA, basically.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
It's that intelligence network of the Last City, and it's because of the way that they interact. They have a official liaison with the Vanguard mentors, or with the Vanguard, and there's a really kind of fun relationship between the Vanguard liaison and the Vanguard researcher, Ikora. But it's just hilarious. That was the Owl Sector records were just really funny to read because of that. But like the whole thing is like it's like there's like this cross-departmental cooperation, but when it comes down to push or shove, it does seem like there goes back to this whole thing of like within the city. You have on the Vanguard side, you have the Praxic Order, which is kind of like the Vanguard's or the Guardians equivalent of a police force or an Internal Affairs. They have the Owl Sector outside and doing all this research and all this stuff. So it's just, to me, that again, that political push and shove or push and pull of everything, to me, is really interesting. And you can see that with the Vanguard, especially with the removal of, one of the legs of the three-legged stool. That stool is kind of teeter-tottering around for right now. And and a lot of times I know it hasn't been called out in game specifically, but there are quite specific references within the lore. Ikora and Zavala have both mentioned, they don't even know if it's if the Vanguard is even necessary even more or any longer.
Yeah,
not in the same capacity.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to, when you have something that's like that powerful as the Vanguard, to for so long be not at its full capacity. And like lore wise, we dealt primarily with Ikora after the death of Cade, but I kind of thought that like watching how Zavala dealt with things, you could clearly see how deeply they felt that loss between the two of them. And I kind of firmly believe that with the Vanguard being as unstable as it is, without that third leg to sort of stabilize the stool, I almost just kind of wonder if maybe they're leaving it like empty for so long because they're building up to this sort of infighting that may be happening.
Yeah, I don't know if it'd be infighting, because as much as they might disagree on a very specific, like the situation, I think that they are still very close to one another. Like, they are actually, I would say that they are in agreement with each other as far as most things.
Sorry, I didn't mean infighting between the Vanguard. I sort of meant as a power struggle between them and the consensus.
In the consensus.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Just because
I totally see that. That's actually...
Because, I mean, if you had the whole issue with the Concordant wanting to remove the speaker from power, you're telling me that there's not a single group in the consensus that has looked at has looked at Guardians and said they're fine now, but if they don't serve their usefulness, why are we keeping them around?
Mm-hmm.
So... I think it's interesting.
One of the things I did want to bring up is the fact that we have gone through so many Hunter Vanguards over the years. In comparison, because Blue mentioned the fact that Saint 14 was the Titan Vanguard, and then Zavala took over, and then with
the list is very stark in the differences.
Okay, see,
right.
Here's what I don't understand. Osiris gets exiled because he's diving too deep into the Vex. But Saint gets to stay Vanguard as the Titan Vanguard while he's off on his crusade against the Fallen.
He stepped down.
But he stepped down as commander, but was Zavala...
he stepped down as...
Oh, okay.
He left entirely.
Okay.
Because that was one of the things. Yeah, that was one of the things. I think that was the reason why. Because I've made that comparison too, and when I went back and read, I think it's Vanguard Commander is the Weblore record.
Yeah,
but he says that he's removed himself completely from the group. Well, not completely, but he's removed his title basically, and so because he won't be able to do both, basically. And I think that largely was the reason why he was never, air quote, exiled, even though he, MIA, was because he did the arguably responsible thing, whereas Osiris was like, I'm not going to fight you, but I'm also just not going to do, what you want me to.
I have bigger things to worry about.
With Osiris leaving, Osiris left he wasn't necessarily exiled.
Yeah, he was
causing him to leave.
It was a
left,
confluence of events.
Yeah, that was the last in the series.
Right. Osiris had his own drama. His was a soap opera.
It really was. I mean, he's just so sassy. He is just that strike where what is it? Is it the Garden World one? Where he complains that he's dealing with Vex in 45 different realities. Oh, he's like, I'll apologize later. I'm busy.
Yep. So we had 2 Titan Vanguards, and then 2 Warlock ones, because right after Osiris was Ikora.
Mm-hmm. Which, that also cracks me up, because that was what Osiris wanted, and the speaker reprimanded.
In the first place.
Yeah, speaker reprimanded him for it. It's I just want there to be a small scene of Osiris being really? Really?
I told you. I told you to do this. So now you kick me out and you do it anyways. But
just in my head, canon, it's that exasperated,
why don't you people just listen the first time?
But oh gosh, Hunters.
And then
you want to talk about the laundry list there?
Well, because the first was Tallulah.
Yep.
Who got eaten by an Ahamkara.
Right.
Is it confirmed that they knew it was an Ahamkara and they were intentionally playing, or they found out as the poker game went on?
Well, and I don't know if they found out but we do. I think that Caliban knew what was going on, because that was when she handed him her bow. That was when he was like, "No, don't do this. Don't do this. Don't."
And she's like,
me.
"I'm out."
And she's like, "Yeah, you'll be fine." And it's like, oh man, which is why I put on there. I'm like, does that mean that Caliban was the Vanguard for a second?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I read that. I'm like, did she just?
But we have no other lore of him after that.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's just he's in that story and that's it. And then,
wasn't Caliban part of one of the strikes that we do?
No, it's Fire Team Caliban. We get
Caliban.
And that's
gotcha.
the Savathun song strike. We are labeled as Fire Team Caliban, which gotcha. I also found. I'm kind of curious as to I don't know if that was just it's a name thing. I mean, some of the Fire Team names that we get. What's the dog?
Baby dog.
Baby dog.
The great
Fire Team Piccolo.
It took me 2 years to finally get that role of that voice. It took me 2 years of running that strike to finally get it. It's so good.
Best audio. I was like, what did you just say? Oh,
Like, because he's just reading from a script, and then he realizes what he said. Wait, what?
yeah.
Baby dog.
Oh my god.
I gotta reset it.
So then we had Tallulah, and then, in my brain, I kind of like, is Caliban the next one? But then the next one after that, we know, is Aphrodite 4. That is from Peregrine Greaves, which I'm waiting for Rick to scream in chat for that one. And then after, I think it's Aphrodite, we have the Swift River.
Swift River. Yeah, Swift River. I can't pronounce the first name either. Swift River.
The only reason I laugh with him is he's the one that it's called out just went missing. Like, they don't know if he's dead. He just disappeared.
He lost his dare. He stayed for like 3 months and said, "Nah, this ain't it. I'm out." and
then 2 years later, they had no choice but to pronounce him dead, so that they could then open the ranks back up, which is when we get Andal. And then Andal is ultimately killed by Tannix, which then gives us Cade. And then Cade is obviously killed by Uldren.
Yeah. And now
Slash Riven.
The interesting... Yeah, and then we have an empty seat. So the interesting thing, too, is there's actually idle dialogue from Cade in D1 that gives a indication that the Hunter so first off, the Hunter Vanguard is it's such a rotating door, because by their very nature, hunters are kind of outcasts. They're very much loners. They don't really do the whole, like, Titans are very militaristic.
They don't team up. They don't team up and compete in a Guardians game event.
Oh gosh,
I'm so mad at them. I'm so mad. I don't want to get into it either.
They'll team up in fire teams when it's necessary, but it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, as soon as the job's done, they're back on their own path. And whereas, like, warlocks will have, like, their libraries, their research, the collaborative research that the warlocks do. The Titans have the military, the defensive, the walls, all that. The hunters don't really have that. So they've always had that struggle of getting that hunter to be a Vanguard mentor, because all the hunters are like, why would we need that? That's stupid. And
they're not wrong.
I'm on the fence, to be honest, because I can't really argue against it, but
yeah, I don't know if I would want to do it.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't. But there is a line that Cade mentions when when we're in D1, when he's standing around the table. He mentions that he only has a year left, and then he can go back. So it does seem that there is a precedent of, if you survive, which I think this might point to Caliban, I think, because of all the known ones. If you survive, there is a threshold after they're like, okay, you've been a good boy for a year, or whatever, 4 years. Your indentured servitude is like
you've completed your military service. You can go.
your conscription is done.
Here's the deed to some land. Go be a good citizen.
That's the carrot on the stick.
It really is. It's and like, because so the dare is how the Hunter Vanguard is sort of chosen, because we know that Cade and Andal dared each other to whoever killed Tannix first would win. The loser would have to be the Vanguard. But so it has to be issued between two hunters, or is it something like the Vanguard will put out and be like, here's the dare, who wants to do it?
It seems like the Vanguard, if the Vanguard's involved at all, it's more about, okay, the dare is on. Like, they like, it's basically like the dare is active, but it's between hunters as far as the nature of the dare. And the thing is hunters love daring each other. That's actually, there's lore pointing to, that's actually the determining factor of a hunter's cloak length, is if you dare another hunter to do something, they're kind of honor bound to take up that dare. And if they win that dare, they get something. It's the whole gambling nature type thing.
Yeah.
I'm not.
The funny thing is that the hunters are so ornery. Yeah. Yep, they're definitely that. The hunters are essentially the teenage boy, teenage girls who are like, I bet that you can't.
I bet you can't do that.
Like, tell
eat
me
a
I won't.
spoonful of cinnamon.
Like, they're just sitting there going, tell me I won't. I'll do it. Tell me I won't. I'll go kill that thing. Tell me.
But the funny thing is that even though they don't want to actually take up the dare, if somebody calls them out, they're going to.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of it.
Right.
Like, that
But
whole
that
Vanguard dare is...
Yeah. That goes
it's
back
not
to
that
the honor.
the Vanguard are set. Yeah, the Vanguard aren't the ones setting the dare.
Nope.
It's the hunter setting the dare, being like, "I bet you won't go do this,"
And
kind of
it's
thing.
They're just like honoring it.
Yeah, it's the ultimate dare, right? Because it's you're giving up your freedom if you lose your dare.
Mhm.
Now, that being said, Chad is making the point of Cade making the comment about, if you become the Vanguard, you need to start thinking about your dare. So it does also seem like the current Vanguard can dare non-Vanguard members to replace them. So, it's like this ever-moving... That's just, like, hunters are... They add so much complexity to the politics to begin
They really
with.
do. Like, it's just... I'm looking at this going, okay, so you have the Titans, they're, the more militaristic bunch, they're the protectors, you need something done, heavy lifting, all that stuff, you got them. You have the Warlocks. You got your research, your hidden ops, your black ops, whatever you want to do, sure. And you have hunters. I don't know, just dare them to go kill stuff. I don't know.
Just dare them. Just dare 'em.
Hunters.
Just tell 'em
Hunters are
it's the
rednecks of the freaking Destiny universe. They're the
hold my beer.
I'm hold my beer. I'm gonna go take care of this.
It's the
I know. I just
the Grimoire card with the Warlock and the Hunter, where it's like the greatest hunter couldn't take down Ahamkara. What'd you say? I was like, oh no, I've killed her.
Oh no.
The best part was Jill writing the Ahamkara scale. I told that Warlock I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
I told them. They didn't believe me.
That's still one of the best, like, hidden gems in lore.
Oh my gosh. I remember when we saw that and I was like, oh, yes.
Yeah, it's just,
but
it's a funny
does seem
system.
to exist between the two hunters. Like, so, like, another non-hunter can't dare a hunt. Like, that's not... Because you get a bit of a sense of that with the Pahanin's errata, what is it? The record book that Pahanin had that has like all the little quips and rules and wisdoms, like, don't make the warlocks look bad, but don't pretend like you're not doing it, basically. Like all that. There is a couple comments about like how the dare, like how gambling, and stuff goes within hunter ranks. And it's kind of like this unspoken thing where they're like, they're always trying to one up each other, but it's like the sibling rivalry, it's like, that thing of where like your sibling is always trying to make you look bad, but only they're allowed to do it. As soon as someone else does it, it's no, that's not allowed.
Yeah.
They definitely have that kind of feel to them. The other thing that I would point out is that the hunters often, they not only is it like a fun rivalry, they're also kind of jerky about it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No.
Never.
I mean, they will bait the snot out of somebody just to convince them to do something.
What? They're snotty and sarcastic? No.
Snotty and sarcastic?
Me? Sarcastic? Never.
Never.
Well, that's the, what is it? Tommy's matchbook, the ghost.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The ghost is like, I'm Tommy. What's your name? Knife. Because isn't that the one the Guardian doesn't talk at all?
Well, that's the one where they talk. Yeah, I mean,
Anor,
you have
it's
I'm
Anor.
Ghost said the hunter. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, no.
I'm Tommy says the ghost.
Yeah.
I'm Ghost says the hunter.
Yeah, that's right. The hunter is Ghost, and the ghost is Tommy.
The other thing with that card in particular is you get that mention that everyone was just like freaking out about for the Guardian games was the fact that nobody's in the tower and they're all avoiding the Vanguard dare, and
That was
everyone's just like self-fulfilling prophecy. I hear. Let's make this happen.
All the memes of Zavala tricking the hunters back to coming to the tower with Guardian games.
Uh-huh. Did you see how much Reddit blew up over that?
Oh, that was so
being
funny.
like, mm-hmm.
Oh, that was so great. It's it's a weird system, but it kind of just it works. It's Todd Howard, it just works.
So with this system in mind, though, with the way that the Hunter Dare works, and we're talking about how the Vanguard is basically not functioning any way that it was intended to at this point, what do we think is going to end up happening with the Vanguard Dare and the Hunters and everything else going on? Do we think there's going to be a revelation and everything kind of molds together again, like everything gets fixed politics-wise, or are we going to have a complete breakdown? It's
one of those things where I think because things have gotten so broken since his death, I don't think you can ever get it back to where it was with just replacing Cade. I almost think it would have to be sort of like a clean sweep of everyone, and you have all new Vanguard as sort of just a fresh era of what the Vanguard could be in order to set in order to like set it back to where it was.
Yeah, and I don't think that even the current Vanguard would necessarily have a problem with that.
Yeah,
because with Oxygen SR3, that particular entry is them having that exact conversation. Actually,
yeah,
it's like because and I know a lot of people like ragging on the Vanguard for their like mishandling of like the political structure, but to be fair to them, they were not put into the place that they were put into for politics. They were put there from like a military or research. And so like even Zavala kind of, I think it's Zavala. It's either Zavala or Ikora, but they basically call out the fact that they are kind of out of their depth right now. Like, the fact that they are managing to keep the city running is a testament to actually how good they are at what they do.
Yeah, and that and them allowing sort of like all these other like the cast of characters that we have in the tower now, it sort of speaks to like we're just gonna kind of go with the flow, and if it doesn't absolutely destroy things, all right.
Yeah, and I think as far as like the future state, kind of to start wrapping up, as far as my thoughts there is, I think it really is going to matter on what happens with the Doritos that are coming in,
Yeah.
Right.
I think that this is an opportune time that if we're going to wipe the slate, it will be a really good time to do that, because what better time to do a reworking of a power structure than, the eradication of the majority of that power structure.
Yeah.
Which,
to be fair,
doesn't bode well for the city, but,
No. To be fair, we don't know what... This is out-of-game information. This is not lore information at all. Lance just put out a tweet today. This is 5/15/2020 about him recording voiceover stuff for Destiny.
I'm in my closet.
In his closet. So we know he's still recording voice lines, so if there's something that happens with the Vanguard, it's not happening next season.
Yeah.
Because next season is going to be...
A certain member from Top Gun is crashing Bungie web calls.
Oh, right. Who did he play in Top Gun?
I don't know. I don't like Top Gun, so I'm the last person to ask about that.
Okay. But yeah, there's a couple different voice actors that are making their presence known within the Destiny community, that they're continuing to voice over stuff.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah. I kind of agree. I agree with you, Blue, that like if this were to be the end of the current Vanguard, now is sort of that kind of coalescence of stuff that's happening in the universe.
That perfect alignment a little bit, whether it's intended or not, you can, whatever, I'm not going to get into that argument, but I do think that it is a rather fortuitous timing to have a refresh, if you will.
Well, because it was we with the trailers of Forsaken, we knew the death of Cade was coming, but that was meant to be a shock that, this was supposed to be sort of like a routine prison break mission. Nothing bad's going to happen. But I was always so surprised with with the Red War that we didn't lose anyone like that. We didn't lose any of them.
Yeah. Well, especially they called out too with Ikora being afraid of things and Zavala finally kind of in his own way snapping a bit there, And then you also see Asher's fear for his continued survival. because he's getting the Vex infection and stuff. Oh my gosh, there's so many loose threads I could go down with that. But
so many.
You guys want to do a preliminary round of shout-outs for the intro session, and then we'll jump back in for the advance?
Let's do it.
Sure.
All right. Cam, what do you got for the advance? Or the intro session shout-outs? What do you have for us?
I would like to shout you guys out for letting me do this. This has always been a community that I've sort of been like on the outside, not necessarily outside of, but like on the outskirts of. And this past year I've been trying to make an effort to get more involved in it. And I've listened to you guys for like a long time. So being able to come on here and talk about the game that I love so much is really great. So I want to thank you guys for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's one of those things that I hope more people make that kind of that connection and that jump and stand out and be like, hey, I can do this too. Because Blue and I, we've studied the lore a long time, but there are a lot of great people out there who are maybe just longtime fans and just listeners who have just a passion to just study it in their own right that should come out and talk about it, because everybody's perspective is super important. No one person is going to have all the answers.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too, off that is like sometimes the best insights are from people who might not have studied it in depth. Like, everyone focuses on a different aspect of information. Like, one person's, that's obvious, is another person's, complete mystery. I mean, that's I can't tell you how many times I'll be in a conversation with someone about something not even game related, just in general, and they'll be like, oh well, I thought it meant this. And it's like, I didn't. I did. Oh, like it just the way that people look at things are so drastically different. But yeah, no, that's why I absolutely just enjoy having different people jump on, even if they're quote unquote not knowledgeable, which is a load of BS in my opinion, but whatever.
I mean, if you played the game, you're knowledgeable.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even if you didn't play the game, there's sometimes I'll be talking to my, my wife about stuff and she makes just an offhand comment. Because I mean, like, if you know anything about stories, which, if you're human, you know something about stories. It's like, there's patterns and stuff that everyone is recognized. And, it's just those insights. It's just general insight. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That is true.
But Green, what about you? Or Cam, was that all of them? Or...
Yeah, that was all for me.
Okay, cool.
My shout out is mainly to just the listeners who are out there who have maybe never reached out and said hi to us, or have been kind of in that boat where you're just like, hey, I really love the lore, but I don't think I should say something. Actually, I'm gonna Hunter Vanguard dare you. I'm gonna dare you to come say hi to either Blue or I online, whether it's on Twitter or in Discord. Come check out what we're talking about online on any given day. There's a lot of gifts. Sometimes there's things that are a little blue, but for the most part,
today we had a serious conversation.
We did, and
I had a serious conversation. Green saw it and was like, nope.
I did totally nope out on that one. No, thank you. I do not want to get into cultural appropriation whatsoever.
Yeah.
But yeah, come say hi. Come hit us up on Twitter. Even if you don't have an account or anything like that, reach out in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's just an email. Blue and I have emails that are same as our, I believe, the same as our handles.
There's also the contact form on the Lore Network site, which means that you don't have to have an account anywhere really. It's completely open, and that'll go directly to our group email.
Yes, it will. And so after that, my secondary shout out is mainly a shout out for the recording that's happening next week. Next week's guest is going to be Gaston. I know that is not how he pronounces his name, but I'm going to make him sound like Beauty and the Beast anyway, because I'm the host. And he is going to be joining us on the topic of looking ahead, as in what in the world is going to happen in the game. Blue?
I just wanted to give a big shout out actually to the people that I had a conversation with this today on Twitter. We had an amazing conversation about there was a situation that came up that someone posted over on BungieNet about the word choice that was, for whatever reason,
used in the mission. It's the mission for Anna.
It's basically the term. There's a term used that in the Korean culture is viewed as offensive, and it was this person's post, which is it was an amazing post actually. But basically, it started this conversation about the purpose of language, really, and like how what's the expectation as far as coming as people, if someone tells you something's offensive, does that mean anything and all that? And like there were so many points where I was sitting there looking at this conversation going, this is gonna dovetail into something really bad, and it never did. Like we never it was probably one of the best conversations I've had in a very long time on Twitter. Like, actually, no, it's just the best conversations I've had in a long time, and it was on Twitter, which was multiple surprises there. But a big shout out to everyone who got involved with that. Wicked, Viru, I think Man at Arms was in there. I just blinked on the Glasgow. Oh gosh, what's his name?
Davy?
Yeah. So like it was just a great conversation, and it went on like all day. Like we were on that conversation thread for predominantly most of the day today. So big shout out to you guys for just reaffirming faith in Twitter conversations, which is hard to do.
Humanity.
It was,
Civil
very
discourse.
Open-minded and reasonable from chat. It was nice. It was just a nice breath of fresh air.
I was gonna say breath of fresh air.
So, with that being said, I want to thank you all for your time. And until next time, remember, with wisdom we conquer, stand strong, stand tall, and keep exploring. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusedFireChat. Links to all our episode archives can be found at www.thelorenetwork.com. Please be sure to email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any comments and or questions for the team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.